microphone okay? Oh, I see. Okay. So I think you're covered. Ready to go? Hello again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. Before I introduce our next presenter, I wanted to do a little plug for Dr. David Erb's Cantica Sanctorum. It's a collection of his psalms. I think there's about 30 songs in here. 50. Okay, so it's almost 100 pages long. So he is selling these. There's a few of them over there, $10 per. There's a little cup over there for cash. He also has a Square Cash account, which is an app, has a little green icon. You use it to, it's like Venmo, you know what that is. You use it to pay people online, and his little tag is on the Post-it note over there, and his card's over there if you'd like to get in touch with him. He wanted me to tell you that for years he was an underpaid music teacher, and now he is an even more underpaid music teacher at a university, and he desperately needs your help to continue to make high quality content like this. And I highly recommend it for family singing. They're fairly accessible and really, really good for family singing. Paul Buckley was for 13 years the director of worship and music at Grace Presbyterian Church in Ocala, thank you. In the South, you never know how to pronounce things. Florida. He teaches periodically at the Theophilus Institute in Birmingham. He's a graduate of Westminster Theological Seminary and is a former assistant religious editor for the Dallas Morning News. Please welcome Paul Buckley.
St. John Chrysostom preached a sermon the week after Easter in which he spends the first paragraph saying, well, notice that the church was full last week. This is in Constantinople in the 4th century. The church was full last week, and look at it now. Everyone's left. They've gone back to the theaters, back to the Hippodrome. And I feel a little bit like that because after the last great presentation, now we're down a bit. I don't know if is there a Hippodrome here that people could have gone to? Is there? Okay. All right. Well, enough of this talk. I'm capable of it, but let's sing. So you have a packet. If you don't have a packet, we can get you a packet. But we'll start by singing Psalm 46 before I proceed to offend everyone in the room. This is a species of chant known as simplified Anglican chant. I shouldn't embarrass anyone, but I mean, are most of you familiar with this sort of chant? It's about as easy as it comes, and you're going to sing the accent marks at the end of each line, which are not very visible, are signaling that's where you're going to change pitch. You're going to move to a new note. So everything to the left of that accent mark is going to be sung on one note. So there's a number of people in the room who know this, so let's just dive into it and see what happens. And we should stand up. Once again, I'm stuck trying to get people to sing right after lunch. Let me play this through once.
To the heart of the
next stanza, and sing more softly, "Be still and know that I am God." And then we're going to have a long crescendo through "I will be exalted among the nations, I will be exalted in the earth." And then at its loudest, "The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our stronghold." Don't sing the doxology in the interest of time. So here we go, "Be still," but we're going to be quieter with it. Be still and know that I am God. Crescendo. I will be exalted among the nations, I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our stronghold. Okay, have a seat. I'm curious, are there any of you who, there's no right or wrong answer here, but is that for any of you the first time that you have ever sung a psalm that's basically ESV, but sung a psalm from first to last in a real translation? Right? Is that a first time for anyone? That's impressive. Okay, but this is Psalm Tap, so what do I expect? But I didn't know. I've had some correspondence recently with an African church planter in Nairobi, and that is to say, he is a native African, grew up in Kenya, and he's looking for some help in teaching his little flock to chant the Psalms. And in one of his emails to me the other day, he said that his people are going to resist it. They're going to say that chanting the Psalms is foreign, Western, and un-African. And I laughed out loud when I read it, because I have spent 13 years in a context where not all people, but most people would say chanting the Psalms is foreign, not Western, and un-American. The other thought that occurred to me was it would be news to Athanasius and Augustine and a host of others that chanting the Psalms would be foreign and un-African. But it does give us some sense of what we're up against, or what I'm up against, since this is my shtick, to have us chant the Psalms. I want to point out something about our previous speaker, and he mentioned that his church, which is right there in Fort Worth, Texas, okay, Cowtown, it's the same part of the world I'm from, his Southern Baptist church is chanting Psalms, okay? It's a Southern Baptist church in Fort Worth is chanting Psalms. Now, I actually want to begin by quoting a Baptist. This is Andrew Fuller. You can get his collected works from the Banner of Truth Trust. 18th century Baptist, Spurgeon called him the greatest theologian of his century. Now here's what an 18th century English-speaking Baptist has to say. "I have long wished to see introduced into the churches, and I almost believe it will be at some future time," he said, prophesying this moment. "I have longed to see introduced into the churches a selection of divine hymns or songs, taking place of all human compositions," which seems to indicate that he wants to do exclusive psalmody. "By divine hymns or songs, I mean the pure Word of God, translated without any respect to rhyme or number," by which I take him to mean meter, "and set to plain, serious, and solemn music. It has been observed by some of the ablest critics that the spirit of David's Psalms can never be preserved in a translation of them into modern verse. Why then do we not set them as they are to sacred music? It is of 1,000 times more importance to preserve the spirit of a psalm or scripture song than to have it in numbers or meter." Now, I mentioned that I've spent 13 years in a context at a PCA church, Presbyterian Church in America, conservative, evangelical church, with a lot of former Baptists who are members, or Baptists who are members who have, for whatever reason, found a home there and retained their convictions about believers' baptism and baptism by immersion and so forth. So the church is permeated by, what some of us have called a Baptitarian ethos. And this is largely responsible for what I'm saying is this resistance that says chanting the Psalms is foreign, un-American. And I often think and of course that's Catholic is the really the sharpest jab. And I concluded a long time ago that for a lot of people, chanting the Psalms, saying it's Catholic, is just another way of saying that it's not Baptist. And they don't have language for saying it's not what Baptists did in 1978 when, I was in middle school or whatever. So you just say that it's Catholic. Okay, so here's everyone has a point that they want you to take away. Here's the point I want you to take away from the whole conference, if nothing else. I'm going to give you the factoid that will change everything for you, okay? Because I sort of believed that narrative. I was a Southern Baptist. I'm a denominational nut. I was in a Southern Baptist church in Texas, near Fort Worth, through high school, and I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. So, I'm not trying to, especially in the presence of a professor from Southwestern. I'm not denigrating Southern Baptists. I'm very grateful for it. But I sort of believed the narrative. People are right. This is not what Baptists do. It's not what they were doing. Okay. Between 1843 and 1956, 113 years, all the major American Baptist hymnals, including African American Baptist hymnals, included chanted psalmody. Now, when I read that in an essay that I found online, and if you want, it's not a great essay, but it was gold, because I laughed out loud and I thought, isn't it something? Because here's yet more evidence that our traditions, all of them, are richer and broader and deeper than we give them credit for, and we don't know our own history. So I did not double check all of those hymnals, but I went and looked at the 1843 one on hymnary.org, which is a great website if you want to go look up all kinds of hymns. But you can look up old hymnals there and see photographs of the pages. Well, I dug up that hymnal, and sure enough, the last 50 pages of it was full of chanted material. And they didn't even blush at the word chant. It says chants. And you turn a couple of pages and it says based on Gregorian chant right there in a Baptist hymnal. So this takes us all the way up to the Baptist hymnal of 1956, which I believe was edited by B.B. McKinney, who is a towering Southern Baptist musician of the early 20th through the mid 20th century, edited a number of hymnals. Now, where did the Baptists get that idea? To put all that chanted psalmody and other, like in that 1843 hymnal, there are also chants where they have put together a pastiche of baptismal texts, Matthew 28, Romans 6, etc., to sing, to chant at baptism. So it's not the complete Psalms, but it's a good representation of them as well as other biblical material to chant. Now, where did the Baptists get the idea to do that for 113 years? Was it a Catholic streak they suddenly had in 1843? No.
Presbyterians.
The Presbyterians. So now Jared gave Lowell Mason, who was, I don't know if he ever mentioned that Lowell Mason was a Presbyterian. And Lowell Mason, Jared's given him a good spanking, and I'm sure he deserved it, but I'm here now to give him 2 cheers, at least on this. Lowell Mason gave us our music for Joy to the World, as well as mentioning yesterday, based on Gregorian chant, When I Survey, Hallelujah, Praise Jehovah, and some other things. But as part of his interest in looking to Europe for inspiration, he decided Presbyterians needed to sing Anglican chants. So he put together a Presbyterian book of chanted material, and because Lowell Mason was, rightly or wrongly, he wasn't infallible, but a guiding light for other Protestant church musicians, the Baptists followed suit. So this again made me laugh out loud because, someone said to me one time, what you want to do with the chant is foreign to the Reformed tradition. Well, stretches of it, yeah, to be sure, but there you are, even in the United States, we U.S. Presbyterians, long before James Jordan came along, or Biblical Horizons, or Theophilus, they had chanted material and were influencing the Baptists. So 1956, for that last Baptist hymnal, is, I suspect, within the lifetime of some people in the room. So, and you're also young, and so it's not that long ago that it happened. So, what do I mean by psalms? So I want us to sing a good bit here, but just to lay a little bit of groundwork, psalms for me is shorthand for all the psalms, not just favorite psalms, not just Psalm 23, and not just a praise chorus based on one verse of a psalm, a place for all of that. But when I say psalms, I mean all of the psalms. In a real translation, take your pick, ESV, New American Standard, whatever, King James, New King James, James Jordan's translation, all of these are, more or less honest attempts at real translation. Sung, not recited in a service, which is, when you think about it, a little bit perverse, because you would never do that with Holy, 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 or any other song that you would just stand and read it back and forth together when you could sing it. So they are, by definition, I think, sung by the people of God in the presence of God. I heard Eastern Orthodox choir director at a seminar one time. She was from Wales and serves in New Mexico in a parish. But her definition of church music was that it is the vehicle by which we move people from the world in which they have been Monday through Saturday into the world of the temple on the Lord's Day, and that means chiefly the Psalms, okay? So I've stacked the deck, of course, but I think this is defensible. Now, this is my working definition of the Psalms for right now. The Psalms are the singing voice of Jesus within the worshiping assembly. I will declare my name. I will declare your name to my brothers. In the midst of the assembly will I praise you. Psalm 22, which Hebrews picks up and says that's the voice of Jesus speaking in the psalm every bit as much as the beginning of the psalm, my God, why have you forsaken me? So the Psalms are the singing voice of Jesus within the worshiping assembly, which means that if we're not singing the Psalms, then we have Jesus' singing voice on mute within the church, which seems like a bad thing to do. And I have concluded after working as a church musician for over the past decade and having thought about all this before, that if we are not doing what we just did a while ago in some form or fashion, whether it's that or whether it's David Erb's, whichever psalm it was we sang of his yesterday that I'm sure is in the book, that our worship is actually sub-biblical. And if we do not recognize that, we really are the odd men out in the history of the church. This is pervasive through the history of the church, that it is important to embrace this. And as I've just demonstrated, this is something that, even American Baptists, African American Baptists, American Presbyterians were recognizing in the 19th century. So we can argue about that if you want, but what I want to get to is to sing through several of these psalms and pick them apart a little bit in our rendering of them, or maybe not. Maybe that won't be needed. But what I want to highlight, there are, I know, in some places in the Reformed world and the Baptist world as well, places where the Psalms are being chanted, being sung in a real translation. And my fear is that it is not always being done as well as it might be. And I say this on the basis of having been present for some of this chanting, and then through recordings that I've heard of various services online that people send me, that I hear from, sent from hither and yon. My point is not to single any place out. So it's great on the one hand if Reformed people are picking up this habit again, but I think there are 4 faults that we ought to address. The first, go over these sort of quickly and then kind of work them out as we go through some things. The first one has more to do with the person setting them up than with what the congregation does. But the pointing at times seems to have no rhyme or reason. Now, pointing, it's very simple with Psalm 46 that we just did. All I had to do was find the last accented syllable of every line and put an accent mark over it to signal that's where we're going to move to the final note. Okay, that's the pointing at its most basic. I've got these 2 notes to deal with in this line. Da 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 da. When am I going to move there? I could have done God is our refuge and strength. 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 Okay, so the basic rule I'm following there is just looking for the last accented syllable. That's what makes sense. But as the chant becomes more complex, this becomes a bigger issue, so that some Reformed churches are singing psalms where they move to the last note on what should be an unaccented syllable, but they land on it with a thud, and so it becomes unnaturally accented. Again, that's more of an issue for those of us who are actually setting them up. The next 3 have more to do with execution, not following through on our commitment to speech rhythm. This is at the heart of what chant is. It's a recitation. It's wrong to say that this has no rhythm. It doesn't have a regular rhythm, but it has the rhythm of the spoken word. But we're not always following through on that, and we'll see if we can highlight that. Insensitivity to text, which is related to not following through on speech rhythm. Treating transitions. You don't have any transitions in this Psalm 46, but in some of these others, I got to start again. Here we go, Psalm 46.
Let's do it.
Okay, some of these we'll sing, there's going to be a couple of notes or more between that first reciting note that we sang most of the syllables on and then the final accent of the line. And the Anglicans wrestled with this for a long time, decades, centuries, where the criticism of its own practitioners is, the way we do this, we're just plowing through the first part of the line and then throw on the brakes for the transition to get to the end of the line. There's got to be a more natural way to do this. And it actually turns out to be a congregational minister who's one of the heroes in getting the ship righted. So let's just dive in a little bit. Let's look at page 9. which is, like only page 2. But they're numbered down there because I took these out of a larger set of things. All right. Okay, yeah, let's just dive in. I'm going to play through it, and then let's see what happens. Enough for the moment. Now, so the thing, this is a little bit unfair because here it is, you have not sung this music before. You may have sung the Beatitudes. I believe this is ESV. And now I'm going to start picking on it. So this is going to be a little bit like choir. So here's what I hear. Blessed are the poor in spirit, where every syllable weighs the same. What are the most important words in this line? Blessed, poor, spirit. Okay, the others are articles and conjunctions or prepositions, and they're not particularly important. Okay, when I say this, I just mean relatively speaking. You can't dispense with them. They're part of the inspired text. And okay, as I'm just saying as a matter of emphasis, if you were to get up and read the Beatitudes, you would not say, blessed are the poor in spirit. You would say, blessed are the poor in spirit. So say that. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to exaggerate to where you think it's ridiculous, the distance between the emphasis and de-emphasis. Okay, like this. Blessed are the poor in spirit.
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 Mm-hmm. Blessed are spirit.
Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah, so much better already. I don't know if you can hear that, but I can. All right? That's greater sensitivity to text. Now, what happens in this next line, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, what's the most important syllable?
King.
King, okay. So it is going to end up sounding basically like a triplet where we're going to emphasize king before we launch into kingdom of spirit. For theirs is the kingdom of for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so sing it like that.
For theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, kingdom of heaven.
Kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, and I know that most of us here are Presbyterians of some sort, but let's try to do something a little bit kinesthetic, and so I want you to press right out here on king and heaven, but back off heaven, okay, for theirs, okay, here we go. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. See, yeah, that's better already too, okay? All right. Third line. Blessed are those who mourn. Now, what I want to point out here is that already in the first couple of lines here, if I were to write this out in the in standard notation, I'd end up something like with some 16th notes. Blessed are the poor. Now 8th notes. There's probably still 8th notes as well. Blessed are the poor in spirit, and then a pickup note that's an 8th note, and then a triplet. For theirs is another triplet, kingdom of, and then a couple more 8th notes. So is chant the same over and over and over again? Not if we're sensitive to text, because see, the rhythm is changing, and it's going to be different on the next verse from that. Now, I don't want a congregation thinking about this, but a large point of this is to say, whoever's going to get up and model this for a congregation, whether it's a cantor or a choir, does need to have thought through this so that they're an exemplar. Okay, so now here's what happens on the third line, second verse. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. There's a tendency to get bogged down. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for, whereas what we want to do is keep the line moving, okay? It has to go somewhere. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, okay? So you hear where the important words are. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Here we go.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness.
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 Yeah, okay, look at this. Righteousness. Do that?
Righteousness.
Yeah, see, that's better. You see, God has made you to be able to do that sort of thing. All right, now, here's what happens in a lot of chant. You look at the last line. Now, see, this has been set up somewhat helpfully because it looks more like what we're used to seeing when we look in a hymnal. But the psychological trick is that there's a big space between for they and shall be comforted, and a big space between for they and shall be filled. But it means nothing. And so what we don't want to do is for they shall be, so where we throw on the brakes at they, because this is another triplet. For they shall be comforted, for they shall be filled. Okay? Let's pick up at verse 3, blessed are the merciful, and see what we can do. All right, so we're not going to do blessed are the merciful. We're going to do blessed are the merciful. Okay, here we go. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Good. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Yes. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Yeah, terrific, okay? Much better than when we started already. Now, I do want to say, I don't believe you when you say, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. What do we want to do right there? This is like a climactic point in the Beatitudes. can we come into it again? And I want you to persuade me this time. So, blessed are you when others revile you. Yeah, and not blessed are you when others revile you. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you. Okay? Exaggerate it to where you think it's ridiculous. And we can always pull back, but let's, here we go. And
Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
yeah, okay, good. Let's move on. Don't do the, won't do the doxology. Okay, just the next page here. So the Beatitudes, if you were going to teach a congregation or anyone else to chant, the Beatitudes are a great place to start because they're repetitive in their structure and more or less even in their length from line to line. So you don't have a whole lot of opportunity to get stuck and stall out. Yeah, you've got a couple of longer lines, but they're short and pithy. And the same goes for, in a different way, for any portion you would want to do of Psalm 119. It's very nice because it's an alphabetic psalm, and so the sections are well contained. I can do 4 lines of 4 here, and the lines are short.
What
So
page are we on, Paul?
this is page 13. 13. Okay, this chant is by A. Gregory Murray. Murray was early to mid 20th century English monk, Catholic, and almost all of his, maybe all of his psalm tones do what this one does, which is when it just like this is true of the one we just did, which is from St. Meinrad's Arch Abbey in Indiana, Catholic monastery. Gregory Murray wanted every time he leaves the reciting note, which is what we're singing typically most syllables to, the note after that he always wants it to be down. And then here's the next reciting note, and when he leaves it, it's below it. Next reciting note, when he's ready to leave it, he goes down before he goes up. And then the last line, once again, he goes down. Now, what difference does that make? Well, it makes for an ease of a system of pointing, because all I have to do with this sort of chant is find the last accented syllable of each line. For the landing note, right, for the resting note, and then back up 2 syllables. If he were to go much higher, if he were to go higher off the reciting tone, that's going to attract a musical accent, even if it shouldn't be an accented syllable rhetorically. If he goes way down low, or changes the harmony, you'll notice that the harmony on his tones never change in these transition notes. Only on the outer notes, no change until here, change here, but no change here. Again, this just makes it easy to point it because I don't have to worry about the musical accents. I can back up 2 syllables. Okay, if all of that is, that's worthy of a discussion on its own, but I'm just showing you how this works. Okay, so your word is a lamp to my feet. Lamp is going to be important. And a light to my path. Let's see what we can do with this.
Your word is
So, okay, let me stop right there and say, so I have started pointing psalms using the dots over the words. There's no one right way to do this. What you will find, at least for now, in the first edition of the Theophilus Psalter is a vertical line. We don't have the psalm in there, but you would see a line between lamp and two. But you see, I'm convinced that plays, for most of us, a psychological trick because we want to put the brakes on again. But it goes right through, so we don't want, your word is a lamp to my feet. Your word is a lamp to my feet. Almost like a triplet, okay? With a little emphasis on the lamp. Okay, here we go.
Your word is a lamp to my feet, and a light to my path. I have sworn an oath and confirmed it, to keep your righteous rules. I am severely afflicted. Give me life, O Lord, according to your word. Accept my free will offerings of praise, O Lord, and teach me your rules.
Now, let me just point out that what happened there on accept my free will offerings of praise, in that case, unlike any other line we've just sung, we moved on an accented syllable. Now, if we're honoring those things, this is part of what makes it not the same thing over and over again, because not only is the rhythm changing according to the rhetoric of the text, but also according to stressed and unstressed syllables, because that sounded different. Okay, boy, we better see. I knew that we wouldn't get through all of this, and part of what I'm wanting to demonstrate too is that. I think, okay, so I'm working on, this is part commercial, I'm working on the Theophilus Psalter along with John Hearn and some other folks, and we're kind of on the music end of things. So if you write psalm tones, or if you'd like to try your hand at writing psalm tones and submit something for consideration, please do. Jim Jordan's goal, as he wrote the psalm tones, was to base them on the Genevan psalm tunes, which I think is an admirable principle, goal. I wonder if Jim's watching. I love you, Jim. But I have to say I'm not crazy about all of Jim's psalm tones, and my experience in doing things at Theophilus and elsewhere is people don't necessarily raise their hand and say this, but they say it at meals and in the hallway. I'm not crazy about these, but I do like this Beatitudes tone. I like this Psalm 46 tone, or I like this Psalm 119 tone from other sources. So I want to, and it's, I know it's not all about my taste or your taste or whatever, but I'm wanting to show that there is a bigger chant world than just those tones, or even the Gregorian tones that we looked at yesterday. So it's a baptism by immersion in other sorts of psalm chant. So look at the last page for a second, where it says communion song, let all who thirst come unto me. Oh boy. So that clock's about 15 minutes slow, isn't it? I mean,
So our next talk doesn't start until 2:10.
Uh-huh.
We actually have about 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Okay, so this is by André Guz, a French Dominican, who now has Alzheimer's, but that doesn't mean he's not composing. I'm going to see if I can get him to give something to Theophilus. But okay, so here's not a psalm, but this gives you an idea of the sort of tones that he writes. Let me play through the tone at the bottom. Now we're going to move in the middle of the line. Move in the middle of the line again. let's just start on that and then, sink or swim on the refrain. All of it, really. Okay. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. From within him will flow streams of living water. Jesus was speaking of the Spirit, which those who believe in him were to receive. To the refrain. Let all who thirst come unto me. O Christ, center of life, pour out your Spirit upon us. All our ancestors were baptized into Moses in the flood and in the sea. All drank from the spiritual rock that followed them as they went, and that rock was Christ. Let all who thirst come unto me. O Christ, fountain of life, pour out your Spirit upon us. The soldiers came to Jesus and saw he was already dead. One of them pierced his side with a lance, and at once there came out blood and water. The one who saw it gives witness, so that you may believe. Okay, sorry, in the interest of time, we skip the refrain and go right back to He parted the waters. All right, here we go. He parted the waters asunder. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, here we go again. He parted the waters asunder. He strikes the rock and the waters flow. Torrents quench the thirst of the children of Israel. Our soul is a parched land, thirsty for you. The typography is very bad there. Okay, if only you knew the gift of God. If only you knew the gift of God, and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have been the one to ask, and he would have given you living water. Okay, why don't we just go right on down to behold water. This is from the Mass of the Samaritan woman. This is from a whole Mass for the Sunday where the gospel reading is the Samaritan woman in John 4. Okay, so behold, water was flowing from the temple. A lovely biblical theological pastiche through this whole thing here. All right, behold. Behold, water was flowing from the temple towards the